Hello. Sorry, I'm a couple of minutes late. It seems that YouTube was confused with my title meeting their criteria of 100 digits, but it said something about additional lines. It didn't make sense. I had to cut it and then paste it, and then it was fine. So maybe a couple of minutes late. Apologies. And I'm just going to say hello. Yes, live right now. Any questions? Okay. Hey, do I look all right? And of course, I'm just kidding. Doesn't make a difference. I could be the top supermodel of the earth and be totally naked, and then you wouldn't be showing up when you did. Of course, you'd show up more, right? But you wouldn't show up for I'm trying not to sneeze, but I should sneeze. Sneezing very hard away from stuff like on the ground when you're by yourself is a very good way not to get sick. And what I'm saying about my clothes is it doesn't make a difference. So I got some nice pajamas, but I still felt like wearing something to make me warmer and look semi-professional. But again, we're going to talk about this today, actually, about whether that is, something to even consider somebody to be a real professional based on their clothes. It's still a very retarded way to see things, and a lot of bad things in the world are happening because people with nice clothes are taken seriously for their messages when they should not. So it's a risky thing to do, to actually trust people who wear a typical suit in a typical way and behave a typical way, and to wear a watch that's more than $20 is it's risky to follow somebody that makes choices like that, right? In connection to the real world. I mean, to follow somebody who, wears a noose around their neck or has things, and too many of them, that they don't use just to brag about it. It's still so much a part of most cultures that it's one of the ways I know that the species is screwed at a time like this. It's related to inequalities that will always create conflicts. So, this is supposed to be the part 3 of the HsD, and participants is 0. I didn't really re-advertise it. It doesn't really make a difference. There might have been 1 or 2 people showing up if I did for a question or two, but not staying for the whole thing and not really interacting in any way. And it is going to get worse in this way. So this in a way is a healing session for you, and I know you won't show up, and you won't show up because of what you suffer from. So here's a scenario. So let's say a patient is ready, or somewhat ready, to hear things about what's causing them to crash their lives, let's say on a cycle sometimes, and they're missing some truths and how to heal these truths, and the psychiatrist doesn't believe that they are capable of hearing the real diagnosis. So let's say everybody in the family of this person said, please help them, just don't say this thing that we know he suffers from, which could be, let's say, bipolar, and just say that he suffers from something else or she suffers from something else, and they promise they would comply. They just are sick of hearing that word. They don't think it qualifies for them, bipolar, whether they can define what it means or not, right? And you guys can't define HsD. You'd have to. HsD is actually causing you to not think properly, and you are missing the schemas to understand the obvious as a concept in the way that I have, as I've defined this theory being a grand unification theory, explaining everything really, because once you accept this is real, so many answers come, and that's very hopeful. But let's say the psychiatrist says, okay, we're going to say this person is lactose intolerant, and prescribe medicines that are for bipolar. Now, there'll be a little bit of progress, but the thing is if that person keeps thinking, so if you don't believe that you suffer from HSD or understand it or accept it, but you actually believe you are only lactose intolerant when you have, let's say, bipolar, there's a limit of how much healing can happen. And again, there will be a crash. There will be a crash where things might be even worse, as if that person had never agreed through the support of their family to go see that psychiatrist. Because eventually, the healing will be limited because the understanding of what's happening there in their brain is limited, right? The psychiatrist might say sometimes when the person is noticing some changes and is getting curious, how does lactose intolerancy affect the brain? Like, how did it do this in my past relationships? How does it make me feel like this and go like on these roller coaster rides? And the doctor would have to answer this. And of course, they'd be only half truths with more dishonesty. And the psychiatrist, like most psychiatrists, I would say, would believe that they are doing good, that they are a good helper by only giving the person a portion of reality of their real situation to help them, because look, there's progress. Well, they're not really helping that person. And I'm sorry, I'm not that kind of psychiatrist, and I'm not a psychiatrist, because that would hurt my reputation for people to even think that, because of the norm of psychiatrists. But what the psychiatrist is doing is actually more for them and more for the family. So can you cure a patient by just making the lives of the doctor and the surroundings of that patient slightly less stressful? Like, that's really the strategy you guys are doing by not showing up at these healing sessions of yours for HSD. Okay, so I just wrote a few things and I'll talk about it. And eventually, HSD is a simple concept, but it is hard to grasp and accept by people that suffer from it, in big part because you don't have the schemas that are very, very simple, and you don't have the right relationships and connections to understand them in the way that you'll realize it's obvious. This is it. And this is how we can heal ourselves. And this is how we'll stop repeating the same cycles of history, which right now are putting multiple Earths. And I say this not in a science fiction way. I say this because our weapons of mass destruction can destroy the planet and every species on it pretty much more than once, if everything goes wrong. And it's not impossible. What is impossible more is you guys to somehow reverse the course of your future history through beginning with the foundation that HSD is real, that your brains are disconnected from reality because of these domestication syndromes that have made you believe things that are not related to reality. And also, in a way, for so many generations, that your brains, as a majority, are incapable of self-correcting. And again, why am I doing this? Where's the hope? Well, the hope is that the biosphere exists, and even if you guys don't care about it, I care about it. And if you guys don't care about your kids, I care about your kids. And if you guys don't care about the future, I care about the future. And if you guys don't care about the legacy of your species, I care about the legacy of your species. Now, because I care, it's possible that some of you out there may or may not care. But in the future, as things get worse, you'll be forced to care, right? You'll be forced to care unless, there's a mass suicide of your species. You'll be forced to care because some of you will be young and you'll know you'll have decades of hardships ahead of you because of the decisions or the lack of decisions of past generations. So let's start with some things here. This week I did a vlog where I said it's pretty obvious that your species' doomsday clock has now gone up to 99.8% of your species. And what I mean by this number is people suffering from HSD in a way that is so disconnected from reality and so unable to function properly up here so as to be part of the solution. It's extremely unlikely that these people would undergo some sort of, 0 people showed up today, healing process to make that number go down. So if the majority of you are part of the problem, you know, don't don't use that point two as hope again, because that point two is speculative, and it's an hypothesis, and it's also that even if this point two exists, they they are unlikely to have any kind of positive impact, except that maybe if they're found one day, and if they gather in some way, because as a collective, all cultures would say, let's find the people that we can verify based on Martin's questionnaire or survey scale are less likely to be deep into HSD, and let's support them as much as possible because they are the core of a future possibility of saving this species. They could be the best of us, except that they're probably as much needing help in this support to to create a solid foundational community to restart things in a way that would possess the right kind of balance and variety of thinking tools to become the guides and mentors of future descendants that will be capable of having the physical health, let's say, if not the mental health, to actually rebuild something or fix things. And when I say rebuild it, I'm thinking more of the world of Avatar than cities, the way you think of cities again, with fancier technology. That's not the future that is a natural one to be thinking about at this point. Okay, so I looked at a video for future scenarios, and future, it could be tomorrow, nuclear simulations. And it's not good, eh? It's like more than 500 million would die within a fairly short time. I think the scenario is about 9 months. I think it was for over 500 million in this scenario that I saw. I think last year was a video from last year. But again, these videos don't understand all the interconnectedness, all the variations, and because we don't understand enough about our planet, about ourselves, and about what is out there, because so many countries are deceitful or secretive about what they have or don't have, and what they do or wouldn't do, and what we are expecting a leader to have as a boundary of, I'm going to retaliate in this way, but not with everything. I'm not going to take the whole planet with us if our empire can't exist, although there are people that think like that right now that are in power, right? People that think if our nation can't be who we are, and again, this is where it's not at all patriotism, it's jingoism at a point where these weapons of mass destruction mean that they can escalate things with other HSD variations in other leaders and countries, and just accidents from not having enough people to fix things, or say, we won't do that, Mr. and Mrs. Leader. We will not allow you to do this. So please step down. Please step down. And they might be Secret Service that kind of are divided to either protect this president or to shoot the president because they are able to reference the outside world or not. So these scenarios that I saw, like this one, it doesn't account for everything. And the world is not fictional, people. It's these scenarios. It's horrible watching this scenario. It's a very short video, and you don't understand what horrible is, because it just looks like a video game, this simulation, but it's reality they're talking about. It's a reality that has extremely high probabilities of happening. But not only that, but even how bad that is, it's still not as bad as really it would be. And it's because the people running the scenarios are only entering a few variables. They don't understand how everything is interconnected in the ecological and social systems, that it would be a lot worse. So when I say to you guys that HSD disconnects you from reality, I'll give you a little bit of my psychohistory. When I was younger, even like before kindergarten, I could tell that adults were making bad decisions because they were obvious to me. That's not the right decision. This is right. This is wrong. It's the wrong decision. What they're doing, I don't understand why they're doing this. So at that point, I had nothing related to HSD as a theory in my head. I just knew maybe something is wrong with that adult, or I couldn't even maybe think that, let's say at 5 years old, I could just know right and wrong is normal. So let's say I lived across street from a school that I had to run back home from because there's a lot of bullies there. Now, if there's a lot of bullies there, it means parents are failing. It means teachers and school administrators are failing. And if I want to talk about this and say this is not normal, I shouldn't dread going to school if I got this gigantic brain that I want to feed. So something's wrong. So I already started knowing, in connecting with reality, something's wrong. But to keep functioning as a child that has no kind of support in this way, knowing that right and wrong is so easy. Well, why are you guys acting like that? Either at my age, my peers, who sometimes would talk about, yeah, it's not fun. And then I would see them turn into bullies as well, sometimes, right? Then, and then I'm not going to do that. So something is wrong with their minds, right? So, and I'm not saying I was born with some sort of cure of HSD. It's just I suffer from species alienation now, which is pretty alone type of illness. And it's just a byproduct of yours. But it's also a byproduct of my making billions of decisions since I was, let's say, 5 years old, where I didn't become somebody that would accept this domestication and allowing my mind to be a failed human mind in this way. So in my life, I suffered from at least 3 or 4. I'm not even sure, because when you get into deep depressions, I mean, your memory doesn't store itself in the long term very well. And but I would say at least 3 major depressions where I would define it as being depressed pretty intensely for more than 9 months or more than a year. Now, what caused this? Of course, doctors who don't know the world is insane, right? Because otherwise they would have gathered together and say, let's fix this insane world by talking about how insane it is instead of just focusing on the elitism of our careers, right? So you can know they suffer from HSD. They don't have these conversations on the news and the media with journalists, for example. I mean, some of them might at some point, they might say, hey, I have more to gain than to lose to start regurgitating a variation of Martin's HSD theory at some point in the future, maybe soon, with what's going on in the world. But, these doctors, they're not ready to confront reality. So they suffer from HSD. That's one way to assess somebody. If you say, well, this is happening in the news right now, right? And you know that the probabilities based on this. Do you believe this is real? Do you believe the probabilities, because you know this, are this high? Yes. And then the people would not behave or respond in feelings or in thoughts and words or behaviors or expressions that relate to the reality of things. And it's because they just can't go there. So my depressions were often related to reality. They were like, I'm working really hard to try to make a better world, and everybody else is being part of the problem. And it's pretty insane. Now, because I was alone and everybody would eventually, and my life is like, okay, it's about to crash this cycle again. Okay, maybe this time going from the National Capital Region to British Columbia for the first time, let's take an honest look at how my brain is failing. And still knowing that other people's brains aren't, at the peak of human perfection, right? But let's look at myself instead of convincing people something's wrong with theirs. Now, in doing this, 2 things happened. One thing was predicted. It was that, my brain would become better in some ways, as long as I didn't allow for the more mad scientist type of mental health workers, like psychiatrists, to not be responsible in their treatments. and I was able to advocate for myself because of various, let's say, types of works or training that I had. But what I didn't realize is that it gave me an immense understanding in what was wrong with other people's brains. And this is how the theory came out. But aside from these depressions I had along the way, there were other things that were byproducts. Well, my father's side of the family had some tendencies of depression and maybe some personality disorders in relatives that may not have been necessarily his brothers and sisters, but cousins and maybe aunts and uncles. And from what I gather with the limited information, because I don't come from a family that talks about this a lot, and anxiety is very strong and dominant, I would say, on my mother's side of the family. So, of course, I would develop these side effects from trying to not succumb to HSD, although I couldn't formulate it in the past what it was and how to explain it like I can now, while other people were succumbing to these mental illnesses that affect majorities. And these are not things that were always part of our past at the high levels that they are now. Our ancestors did suffer from believing things that in an honest conversation once in a while they could tell that doesn't make sense. Like I'm watching a nice documentary, 30 minutes, about Charlotte Côté, a First Nations woman who accomplished a lot from Vancouver Island to becoming a university professor in the States. But, when she talks about the stories that are related to her ancestors and her spiritual aspect of her culture, is, for me, it helped me realize again, okay, so I'm curious about their culture. I've given back a lot to their culture, including on Vancouver Island. But when, let's say I wouldn't want to participate in their cultural, they would say, wait, you can't reject our cultural thing and work for us and want to be accepted by us. And the thing is I would point out that it's not the cultural part, it's the supernatural. You have a supernatural element, and I'm not religious. So how you are victimizing me now is how you were victimized in the past. You're trying to domesticate me, or you're turning me into, these conversations didn't necessarily happen, but they make sense, right? In relation to HSD, is these cultures have beautiful creation stories, like every, culture has. They have creation stories, and a lot of them have, apocalyptic parts to their stories, some sort of ending that has variations of themes. And you can tell, what was dominant in their beliefs or attitudes or values, in their ancestors' times, because some cultures have creation stories without apocalyptic or ending stories, but many do have, and those are scarier cultures to interact with. But the First Nations people as a whole, they do have an element of the supernatural. So if they say I reject them, they might say it's racism, or they might say, and it's actually me saying, no, that, I'm connected to reality. I'm more into the scientific paradigms, not the monetary, magical, or not the religion, supernatural. And it's also weird for me that a lot of First Nations are Christians, let's say, because in a way it causes cognitive dissonance and incongruences with their cultural beliefs that they also claim to have at the same time. And it also keeps them linked to oppressors of the past. So what they don't understand is they're oppressing me by judging me to maybe not want to partake in do a lot of the things. I'd love to do basket weaving. I'd love to learn some of the things. Hunting is not something I wanted to do with my brother or father, but I would do it with cultures that are First Nations. But I wouldn't want to get too much of their supernatural aspects of why they think they do things that is related to the supernatural. And I would be pushing that back. And they might feel judged as if I'm judging their culture or them as people. And I would just have to explain. And again, they wouldn't have the schemas. They would keep believing that I am, considering them as a judgment that is different than what it really is, because it's pretty simple. It's like the supernatural part is there. and you don't have to put it there. And everything else I would love to participate in, but not as a worldview, but as a cultural experience and social interactions with them. Now, I'd have to do a video just explain this, that I would have to. So if I apply for more jobs with First Nations, I would say, this is me. If you see me refusing an invitation for something, it has nothing to do with respect or honor. It has more to do with, I do not want the supernatural in my life, and this is how I define the supernatural. Because the only thing it does is disconnect us from reality, and it's not a healthy thing to do, especially when reality is going to keep crumbling more and more around us right now. So we don't need to break our arm and then make an appointment at the barbershop. That's not how it works, right? Oxymorons, like things like Christian Science. Like, if there is such a thing as Christian Science, then focus the science you're doing on trying to provide evidence for what you believe in, maybe. But the worst right now is lethal aid. People are popping out that word, lethal aid. So if you don't believe that our species has failed, this is one of the scariest terms that people think is normal to use. I'll write it down because it'll have a bigger impact on you to look at it this way. So lethal, I don't know if you have a positive way to look at this word, aid. And then aid, I don't know if there's a negative way to look at this word, but try to get these words together as a way to keep justifying war as a species. It's pretty pathetic. Lethal aid as an oxymoron right now that will spread and spread. And people will say, I'm proud of my country for sending lethal aid. Not sending, mediators that have human thinking tools that are connected to reality, but sending lethal aid. That's your species. It's pretty pathetic that you'll keep having kids and destroying their brains, right? It's pretty sad. There's another oxymoron I wanted to mention. I might mention it later or in the notes. So what are your idols, families, and you saying in these times? So I'm doing vlogs. I don't know if people I know, I don't think they're talking too much or they're posting things unless they're just regurgitating a video maybe about Ukraine. But most people are not doing it. Most people want to get back to their normal, which is not human standard normal, but they're not ready to accept that. They have HSD. But who do you like as singers or actors, or wish that politician was a leader or not? Then what are they saying, your idols? Even scientists, what are they saying? Because I'm looking at Jane Goodall. I put a comment on something Jane Goodall put on TV, and it's just not enough. It's just not enough. The people that have so many followers are saying nothing, not enough, or things that aren't even connected to reality sometimes, or they're childish, they're infantile, their comments, if they even say something, but they don't want to say something because they don't want to lose fans. And even if they said something, it would probably be stupid that even their fans wouldn't want to hear it. They'd want to keep believing this is just a great singer, and they'd be saying, oh, just come out with a new album. We need your music right now. We don't need your stupid comments about current affairs. So evaluate this, people, and then you'll know what kind of species you are and what kind of conversations you should be having about this to try to at least bring more awareness about HSD. My family, many of them haven't talked to me or don't want to talk to me or wouldn't know how to talk to me about what's happening right now. Me, well, you can see me, but ask yourselves about you. What are you posting on your social and what is the motive behind you posting it? Do you understand it? Could it harm or help? What does it say about you, what you post or don't post? Look at this, and then you'll know a little bit, how HSD might be affecting you, how you want to be part of the norm, but not really participate even in the norm. Watching part of a conversation that Putin put to his people, and I didn't finish watching it, but I'm listening to it, and he's criticizing, the empire of lies, like NATO or the USA, and what he's saying is accurate. It's accurate. But what he doesn't seem to realize, or he does, but he doesn't give a damn, or he realizes maybe partially, is he's also describing his own behaviors. And, and it's worse. So, how is that allowed for so long? And how are his people doing less to say we don't agree than the USA, who are also saying we don't agree? The USA have also um, protested wars of the USA, right? Vietnam and examples like that. So in Russia, the evidence is that it's worse there than USA. But it's not wrong what he's saying about the USA and how, history unfolded like this. But he's actually doing the exact same thing. And he's more successful in the toxicity of how he's doing it. Now, if let's say there's a documentary or journalist or a general in the USA or a past diplomat that interacted with him a lot that's talking about it, why don't they say this? Why don't they say he is right? We all act like this. There's something wrong with this. Does he realize he's worse than the norm, Putin, when he says all these things that he's right about us about? Or does he not realize? That should be the conversations. If you want me to have hope that you're taking your own wellness or healing seriously. So a lot of what you see is actually egos. It's strategy of egos. They'll say it's strategies of war. It's strategies of egos and positioning their own nations or in their own careers to have more power. How they predict, and it's really gambling. It's really gambling with their own people of how things might unfold when there's so many sick people up here who don't even know when they're dishonest, these sick people. So this is your species. Man, I don't even want to talk or do more vlogs about Kiev Wadiev. And he never answers me when I write on his blogs on YouTube. But right now, this guy is very disconnected. Like, he knows what's happening in Ukraine, but he's so disconnected with his ego that he's the only one that's on this prime ministership campaign, I think. And of course, because he does this, more people in the Conservative Party are like saying they're going to run for a position either as prime minister or the leader of the. It's like, what the hell? Why are you doing this now? Why do you think this is a good time in history to go campaign as if the election for prime minister is next month? You guys are friggin'. Why is he doing this? Is he doing this because he's got a plan to heal the world? No, it's freaking ego strategies. You guys are so freaking screwed up in this way. Your new normal scares me. If I ask 10 people on the street, describe your ideal new normal, it freaking will be so obvious to me that it'll just be a definition that will lead to your ongoing crashes. You're very disconnected from who you really are as a species, what your proto-societies are really like, what's coming, even in scenarios that was horrible, but that is still a hopeful scenario. It really is. The people putting it up, they don't see that it's hopeful. They think, wow, how horrible this is. But you can tell their tone, and then subscribe, and then like, and then, it's like, oh my God, you guys are disconnected from the reality that is crashing all around you. Inequalities. I'm reading in a comic book there. I could go get the page. And it says, pointing at the bathroom, I read a lot in the bathroom. It says that anytime a man or a woman is elevated at a position higher than somebody else, and it doesn't have to be as high as like king or president, that automatically there's a when they represent something that is not ecocentric or not just them. And it could be them, right? It could be, let's say they make a choice for their career, which is their life management. But if they're in this role and they don't have an ecocentric worldview, it leads to corruption. It could either be the president of a company or of a country or a king or a religious leader. Anytime you're above somebody else, it is easily measurable scientifically to show that that person becomes corrupt with that power. And yet you still have so many varieties of these systems that gives other people power. And sometimes just power over two people is enough to send somebody, whoa, way off the scale of corruption and compromised thinking and feeling and disconnection from reality about who they really are and how they're really harming the people they love. It's insane. If you're not having these conversations, you're not getting better at this stable mind thing that you think you're making progress with. Being a social creature, I was telling a relative lately that when I get up in the morning, I seem to want to believe that there's a dog that I used to take care of that is waiting for me, that I'll be happy that I'm waking up. And I really miss animal friends that I've taken care of in the last few years and who were capable of friendship when the people primates are not. And and I cry a lot in my loneliness because I don't even have access to that. And the person says, well, go visit that person with the dog, and they know that's a person I don't want to visit. But they don't say, hey, where you're house sitting, you can house sit the dog sometimes when they go on vacation. He wouldn't say that, right? It's it's not related to me. If I say this is how I feel, this is my needs, people can't advise or suggest, and that includes psychiatrists, something that is related to the actual person that's expressing their life's experiences. And I see this so much in everything. Everything. Earth Day is coming up. I was supposed to have time to look up to see if Greta is doing okay, if there was any research I could do to see what she's been up to, if anything, because I haven't really seen much videos or her talking about anything. And it could be she's just preparing for Earth Day stuff. She's healing from the insanity that she realizes is a lot worse. And she might have actually had access to some of the things I sent to her team, which talks about the true problem is up here. If we fix this, the climate will eventually self-heal, but we have to stop hurting the biosphere by fixing this. Why are we breaking things all the time? And we're doing it with even more technology to break things. Our technology is mostly to break more things. It's not to fix more things, it's to break more things in the biosphere. So she might have been overwhelmed eventually by realizing more with all of her efforts that things seem to be going the opposite direction. And maybe I'll talk about young people, and I'll talk about people that I've met that have somewhat of a immunity to HSD tendencies maybe next time, because I put a question mark today on the title. It can't be the third. I have to do more of this and talking about HSD. It's really, I guess it's not. I want it to be a cosmologist, but it's really one of my responsibilities, I guess, because nobody else is really talking about this, and it's my own theory, and it's the most important thing for everything. Because even if, let's say, we discover an asteroid heading our way, and suddenly there's some great unity where the war ends and everybody's sorry and let's work together. Well, working together won't even be possible because we are so divided and competitive in our societies and our cultures and our worldviews, and our brains are programmed like this for so long that to deviate for collaboration at the scale it would be needed for an asteroid, and to actually be working on the right solutions without arguing, and by understanding enough about ourselves and what we can succeed at or not at this stage of creating more machines, but with less and less quality as our minds are failing us, and making assumptions. No, that's okay. No, it'll work. It's pretty sad to see. The news, yeah. So it's good that the news, especially news that usually doesn't cover international stuff, is covering more international stuff. But it's still pretty sad because it's still anthropocentric. It's not ecocentric, because there is ecocentric news happening, which should dominate or at least be included along with the anthropocentric. I mean, ecocentric trumps anthropocentric, right? So the biosphere is where we live. So it should be a higher priority than our species. So, but still, I don't see, even as Earth Day is approaching, as there's probably already been a lot more records of climate or heat related disasters and I still believe that there's things going on related to volcanoes, and I also think that there's something going on related to the sun, and it could be just cycles we don't understand that are kind of synchronizing. It could be nothing out of the that is not within past experiences that we should already know have these cycles. But there are things happening where we're not hearing enough about our natural world, about the earth, and about what is happening with it. And I think it should be included because it would kind of maybe tell us that our lives shouldn't be focused on the war. And when we focus it a little bit less on war, with paying attention to other things like the planet, then I think the war would go down because we're focusing on the planet. So what we think about manifests in our behaviors. But our behaviors right now is just mostly talking about the war. And I'm not saying replace the war with sports, but replace it with a higher priority like the biosphere, like Earth-related things. Because if we do, it gives us a break from the war, kind of, but not too long of a break, but it takes us away with a higher priority, so that if our behaviors manifest in another way, it's not going to be, to subscribe to the sports channel. It's going to be to kind of start watching more documentaries to understand geology or the Earth system sciences, right? It's going to manifest into something positive. But you got to insert that in the news and stop having news that has commercials that contradict or that supports what you just criticized. I mean, you're not I can only see you as a developmentally disabled species when you keep doing this. And that includes like some of your most famous news channels. I'm not sure what that one means right now. Altruism is not just an intention. I'm going to skip that one now too. Dear BC resident, I have to open up a window. Okay, I'll do that. I'm just running out of patience doing these things by myself and talking to myself. And it's not in a bad way. It's just that, this is going to be there on my YouTube channel, as this guy wanted to talk about important stuff. And we just didn't care. And again, I've shared so many things with so many groups that so many people know about me and the things I want to talk about. I don't need at all to keep sharing or advertising things without advertising things, right? Without getting products that are sold in my advertising. But by just sharing, by just talking about things, by inviting people, sending emails, can I record a discussion about this? And nothing's happening. I don't need to do more of this. HsD already explains why there's nobody here with me right now. I don't need to get one person by spending 100 hours to try to get one person. It's not going to make a difference. And when I get that person, it'll just be a temporary thing. And then the person will go back to their HsD. So yeah, talking to myself here is still a lot more useful for future history when people review my videos, which should be done from the beginning of when they were posted to now, because there is a schema sequence that you can get more effectively in that way compared to going chronologically backwards. Okay, so I'm gonna open that Dear British Columbia Residents, which is already posted on my YouTube, which already I sent when I wrote this. I was so proud. I sent it to thousands of groups and politicians and universities, and no conversation about it. So, that was disappointing, but it's also evidence that HsD is real. It's real. Like, you guys just don't want to talk about reality or these things. You just don't. Going back again to my life is, suffering from major depressions and anxiety where you're in bed in a fetal position for a year and coming back from that without really the structures of social service providers support that could take most of the credit from me recovering from that, but more my theory, understanding my brain and your brains being more what was responsible for my progress multiple times with these deep depressions. And now knowing I'll never suffer from a deep depression again, but definitely I'll suffer from sadness for many things for the rest of my life that have happened, that are happening, and that will continue to happen because of your lack of humanity through HSD. Okay, so I'll just choose a few parts of this Dear British Columbia residents that I think are a little bit more linked to HSD. So I say here, for example, although tests showed I was smarter than average, not a genius. I knew my thought processes weren't, and by the way, these were tests, right? That's one of the first things I did when I was on Vancouver Island. I was made an appointment and I rode my motorcycle at the time all year round. That I did this for the first 2 years on the island is I rode my motorcycle down to Victoria and did some testing where some were related to IQ, and couldn't find anything really wrong, except that I suffered from things, right? But it's not because my mind had any lacks of different types of intelligence. So I knew my thought processes weren't functioning as well as they should. I allowed Island Health VHA representatives to experiment on me and not only gained a lot of insights into my own brain's functioning, but also insights into the workings of theirs. Now, of course, just saying that sentence, let's say I'd be in all those years, every time, let's say I saw a counselor or a doctor, I would say, well, thank you for interacting with me. I would tell them because it gains insights into my mind, but also into yours. They would look at me like, wow, this guy's nuts. He's got the nerve to think that he should be interested in my mind, or that there's that he's capable of studying my mind. It's that insane, your inability in among mental health workers to even know that you are capable of sometimes suffering even more than your clients, but you still show up for work. And sometimes your clients suffer less because they are actually wanting to get better. You just want your paycheck. That's pretty pathetic. I saw this a bunch of times. I could tell that person has a more dysfunctional mind than their patient, but they're showing up, they're doing their best, and I'm seeing them struggle while the patient is getting better and the mental health worker is getting worse. Indeed, one of the questions I needed answered most desperately was why most of other people's brains seem to be malfunctioning even more than mine. And it was like this even in my worst times. Even in my depressions, I was a super nice guy, and I was able to, sometimes be a better listener than the average person through a deep depression, and able to understand others and be sympathetic and be easy to deal with. And in those times, I was still able to see somebody that thought they were helping me, and I could see they needed more help than me, because my way up was easy. And sometimes it wasn't as complex, my issue. And I'm not saying that it's not serious to suffer from deep depression, but compared to HSD, where it's a lot more complex because there's a variety of things to be working on. It's a simple thing to grasp once you grasp it, but there's a variety of ways to heal yourself from it more effectively, because it's not just about accepting the theory. It's about rebuilding a brain to be resilient in a way that connects it with reality of itself as a brain, and of the social systems and what they're really like that they're living in, that person, and the ecological natural world. So for me, I still had that connection. So, although coming back from a deep depression is a tough thing, it's still just, one way up there, and it doesn't have a lot of variations to it compared to somebody that might not be depressed at all as a worker, but I could tell their brains are not working that well when it comes to connecting to reality and connecting to. If you don't connect to reality, things get worse. They keep getting worse, and it's easy to see. And I could point it out if I have conversations with people, or even if they don't give me permission to kind of give my opinion to them, I can see it. I can see them, let's say, talking to somebody else, and here's the choices and how they could have responded. And let's say that would have been best for that patient, but the mental health worker chose or impulsively reacted in a different response. And I can pretty much trace it back to what their brain is experiencing at the time, which it makes it scary for me that they're working in mental health, right? While most people's lives sped up in regards to scheduled activities and responsibilities, progress in personal development for almost all of these Canadians slowed down to an alarmingly slow rate or even regressed. They could not even admit to themselves the harm that this was doing to their ability to be healthy role models for the next generation. You know what your new normal is? Is to go back to your sped up lives of having too many things on your schedule that where none of them you're really good at because there's too many of them, and you don't have values of quality, you have values of quantity, and also of consumerism. That's what you want to get back to, because that's what keeps you away from looking at yourselves in your mirror and doing your own personal development work all the time. Everyone I met seemed to be satisfied with this state of affairs and wanting to get back to it, and I needed to know why. Why do people even want this elastic to be there to bring them back to their unhealthy, culture-breaking lifestyles? I'll go to the end, but you can read this, dear British Columbia residents, or my PDF will read it for you. Let me read another thing here. Indeed, it will in fact help them mitigate their ruined days if they continue to refrain from trying to understand what it is like for someone like me to suffer from species alienation. So this is why I've discovered less and less, even when I reach out for it and I'm willing to allow for a different diagnosis just to get a listener in my life, is because I have no choice to talk about my real issues, species alienation, which is linked to their own issues of HSD. Is I receive less and less assistance, for people that get paid to help me. And I have this card, and this society I live in says they're supposed to help me, and they somehow my file gets closed or something. And it's because when I talk about species alienation, I have to talk about their HSD, and I can even provide examples, to the people helping me. And it's not an attack or personal. It's just their mind pushes back right away. It's just reality is not something they can handle right now. They just have to survive today. And maybe there's a future that never comes for most of them where they'll deal with reality later. Well, I can't be helped in the mental health system by just having somebody with basic counseling skills if they don't want to do it based in reality, okay? Which is indeed what they have done. Even Island Health VHA representatives who, if given a chance, would love the opportunity to continue experimenting on me by just having somebody, oh no, I know what you have, it's this instead of this, or this instead of this, or try this instead of this. And I'm saying, well, that medicine is fine. Well, there's no logic other than just being a guinea pig. Like they can't, and they get mad at me if I advocate for myself medically by saying, please, I'm not a novice. I have a few diplomas, that I could show you that makes you understand I'm not a novice. You can explain your strategy for wanting to try this, and that they refuse or they think I'm a problematic patient and they want to attack me now because I ask for explanations of their strategy. It's pretty ridiculous. Refuse to make any true attempts to understand what suffering from species alienation is really like. They simply don't realize that I'm indeed quite normal by human standards, if you define sentience and sapience properly, and easy to figure out if one admits the premise that I am a truly genuine person who has only one face to show others. And I say this because a lot of what makes people's HSD worse in this scenario of not connected to reality is they sell a brand, they sell an image of who they are. And the unspoken agreement is, don't challenge my image, I won't challenge yours. And even like Putin right now, there's a lot of leaders who are afraid to challenge his image when he puts a video that talks in this way to his people, where it's true what he says about us, but he's doing it worse. And we don't really want to talk too much about that because it means our image is also challenged. And HSD makes it no, no, let the bad guys be bad guys and there'll always be consequences and there'll always be bad guys. Yeah, you're sick. You can't self correct as a species thinking like this. So get rid of your brands, get rid of your images, and just say, this is who I am, and live transparent lives like I've been living. And that's the best therapy you can get from HSD at this point, right? Is to actually be an open book and allow yourselves to be challenged at any time. Of course, you can tell people, hey, challenge me in a more supportive and gentle way, but you can keep challenging me. Now, Putin has enough advisors that have the numbers on their side, right? So that they can challenge him even with gentle. You can use a sense of humor with Putin to reach him in a more gentle way. He's got a sense of humor and he appreciates that in others. But the people around him that are allowing this at the detriment of their own nation and peoples that they claim to want to be representing is, they are as bad. And again, I could say this about NATO, the United Nations, Western countries. The majority could easily challenge somebody, but they don't have the thinking skills, the mediation, the human thinking tools. They don't have the patience, and they don't know how to deviate from this game where this is how you talk about a dictator and this is how you talk as a politician in your country. You can't really, you're just selling brands and images. You're not really reality related. Perhaps as they themselves suffer from the ailment of Homo sapien domestication, HSD, they simply cannot grasp the possibility that someone who they see as being beneath them in society's social status scale, because I don't have a job or a mortgage or, too many assets that I don't use, most of them all the time, might be the exception and, unlike them, did not fall victim to becoming a good domesticate. And again, this is a pattern I've noticed in parents more is, used to be parents would help empower their kids to become the best they can be, but now they help their kids shoot right for the norm. And by doing this, and I'd have to explain this later, every time you aim for the norm, you lower the standards of the norm. Every generation to now, every 6 months, right? It lowers faster. The cycles, again, the bell curve for you guys as a species because of HSD doesn't apply anymore. So there are ways that you're off of the social, because you're dysfunctional minds. As social creatures, you're not even scientifically approachable, right? You don't even see yourselves as having flawed minds as you study other species who learn faster than you, and who have smaller brains but learn faster than you. You still see yourselves as superior to them. So it's pretty much impossible to help you. But the hope is it's in mitigation. It's still making things less worse for your kids' generation. And again, that's what sapience and sentience would lead you to act like. So that's why I'm like this. I can't bring the world back to what I was convinced it was, although I was observing as a 5-year-old, that's not the way it is. That's not the way adults are behaving. That's not who I want to be when I grow up, behave like this. Even if I believe that was the ideal world, it's still getting worse very fast, and it's not at all, you're not at all as superior as a species as you think you are, and the evidence is just plainly there. I said recently in one of my titles is, what if my research, I've said this to a few religious people. I said, I'm not religious. I'm not claiming I'm Jesus or anything like that, or if he was around or not, or what he would have been like. But let's say there is a Jesus and his father, and they've been arguing for since 1968, let's say, because I was born in 1970. Let's say they were, and this is a fictional scenario. I do not believe this. Let's say they're arguing that his dad wants to send Jesus down another time and try again to save us because his mission totally failed. Although we don't know, right? History keeps being rewritten by the oppressors, right? And the oppressors are really Christians. It's pretty sad they took his name. It's pretty, if he was real, he'd be coming back straight for them as a punishment. And supposedly if he comes back, it's the punishment time. So let's say his dad wants him to come back and try again. It's like, that was traumatic last time. And they're not smarter. I mean, there's more infrastructure they believe they've developed, but they haven't, right? Not based on sentience and sapient. So, Dad, can I just have some guy manifest as an independent scientist, Dr. Humanix, and see, if it'd be worth me going back, if there's a chance for them? And my research is not good. It's not good that it's possible to save them. And to save your species would be miracles. And if you're going to do these kind of miracles, you might as well just restart from scratch, right? If you're going to do the type of miracles to save you guys that is required, it's not the same world anymore. Might as well start from scratch if you have the ability to do miracles. Okay, we're over an hour, so I'll end soon. So, and my research, and I'm not going to, I don't believe this stuff, but I wouldn't go up there. They would just watch my YouTube channel or just experience it through my brain and my more objective observations of the human condition. And it's pretty pathetic. Now, this is something that I know that and again, this is a fictional scenario, people. I do not believe this. There's no evidence for this. And I believe in things where, well, even if there's no evidence that is probable within the realms of science, but I do not believe in this. But let's say aliens have been observing us for, let's say, 50 to 100 years. And let's say they've learned, to tap into the internet and understand, let's say, the English language, and they come onto my YouTube channel and they would say, okay, well, this planet is unique. And you know how our planet is unique? It's unique because it's where we're from. And I saw a video the other day of scientists, they found a planet better than Earth. Do you know how freaking ridiculously insane that makes you to say something like that? Like a planet could be better than Earth to live on? That is such a scientist that is suffering from the mental illness that you guys think I have, that says that, first of all, there's no evidence for that. It's mostly assumptions. But also, even if there's evidence, to interpret it in a way of something evolving where we're from, so complex, where this is where we're from. We will never terraform a planet to be as good as this one is right now, even as it is crashing. We'll never find that. The deviations of specifics of planets, when it comes to where it's positioned from its star, whatever type of star it is, to also the combination of elements and how they've found a balance with organisms to be as good as this. It's just a ridiculously unscientific, disconnected from reality thing to say. Found, like, I don't know if they call it a super Earth or whatever, something better on Earth. It's such somebody like that should be taken out of the realms of science and get a life jacket, a straight jacket for saying something like this. It's ridiculous. Okay, I want to finish up soon. Altruism is, I wanted to just bring you back to a video. I think it was number 3 of my lessons in critical thinking. And Jean-Marie, I think he was the closest one to the camera, who was trying to convince me to wear nice clothes. He knew I'd be the one more delivering the trauma programs in Uganda, but he wanted me to dress nice for when I meet important people with them to get funding. And again, note that l'habit fait pas le moine, and actions count more than theory, right? So altruism is not just an intention. And when it is an intention for people, it usually they don't even have the skill sets to manifest it in a way that provides programs or workshops. And I could tell because I gave a workshop that he was in. I believe he has since then died of COVID. But if you spend your entire life talking about altruism or your intention to implement altruism and you never do, as opposed to me who's wearing pajamas and who's doing this by myself again today, if you can't tell the difference, as most of you can't, again, it's pretty sad. Oh, that's the last thing. More money in. I'm hearing commercials, more funding in education or medical, And again, none of these commercials are talking about what's wrong with the broken system. So again, it's all about throwing more money into a broken system. And then 10 years later, they'll say, well, you put money in, but it went there. So these elites who didn't really do anything different and it stayed broken. Well, it's because when you asked for it, you were part of the problem. You didn't have the courage as you were asking for it to admit that you were part of the problem. The people putting these commercials. We are all in the medical and education field. 99.8% of you, if not 100, are part of the problem. Throwing more money at culture breakers is a sign again that you are not stopping your failures as a species. Okay, this is all very negative sounding, but again, reality is negative right now. So if you want to have a positive impact on reality, you must accept the negative aspects of it.